Earth was never meant to be important. For most of its history, the planet stayed quiet on the galactic scale. It sat on the edge of mapped space, circling an average yellow star, surrounded by nothing that powerful empires wanted. To the great civilizations of the galaxy, Earth was just another developing world, loud, divided, and slow. Humans argued with each other more than they explored the stars. Their governments changed often, their priorities shifted constantly, and their technology looked messy compared to the smooth, unified systems used by older species. Observers watched from afar and wrote short reports. Earth was marked as unstable but harmless, a place to monitor, not to fear. Humans did reach space, but not in impressive ways. Their first ships were small, fragile, and dependent on shared or traded alien technology. They followed routes already mapped by others. They obeyed rules written by species far older than them. When they spoke in galactic councils, they were polite, cautious, and mostly ignored. Other civilizations believed humans were creative but undisciplined, brave but inefficient, a species that might one day matter, but not anytime soon. That belief became common truth. What the galaxy did not understand was how humans reacted to being underestimated. Earth was a planet that had never known true peace. Even before reaching the stars, humans had lived through constant conflict wars, shortages, disasters, and collapses. They learned early that systems failed, leaders fell, and help did not always come. Survival on Earth was never guaranteed. Because of that, humans developed a habit of preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. This habit followed them into space. While alien powers expanded easily, using stable resources and ancient knowledge, Earth struggled. Humans did not have endless energy cores or perfect materials. Their supply lines were weak. Their colonies were few. Every loss hurt more. Every mistake was expensive. Instead of slowing them down, these limits shaped them. Humans learned to build things that could survive failure. Publicly, Earth looked divided. Nations argued, corporations competed, news networks focused on politics and economics. From the outside, it looked like humanity was barely holding itself together. But under that noise, something else was happening. Quietly, carefully, deep beneath civilian shipyards, research stations, and asteroid mining facilities, humans began asking different questions. Not how to look powerful, not how to impress the galaxy, but how to survive if everything went wrong. What kind of ship could keep going if it was cut off from home? What kind of crew could function if no rescue ever arrived? What kind of design could adapt instead of breaking? These questions did not interest the galaxy. No one was watching closely enough to notice. Human engineers stopped copying alien blueprints. They stopped chasing elegance and speed. They focused on strength, endurance, and adaptability. Instead of single-purpose ships, they imagined vessels that could change roles mid-mission. Instead of trusting one perfect system, they built many imperfect ones that could replace each other. If a system failed, another would take over. If both failed, the crew would fix it manually. The work was slow, often frustrating. Many early designs were ugly, heavy, and inefficient by galactic standards. But humans were used to that. On Earth, progress had always been messy. Training changed too. Human crews were no longer trained only for success. They were trained for isolation, loss, and chaos. Simulations assumed communication blackouts, internal damage, and overwhelming enemy force. Crews were taught to make decisions without orders, to argue openly, and to adapt quickly. Command structures were flexible, not rigid. If a leader fell, someone else stepped in. No ceremony, no delay. From the outside, none of this was visible. The ships being built were labeled as research platforms, long-range exploration vessels, or heavy logistics carriers. The paperwork looked boring. The designs were buried in layers of civilian use and legal complexity. Even if someone had tried to investigate deeply, they would have found nothing clearly threatening, just humans doing what they always did, experimenting, failing, rebuilding. The galaxy believed it understood humanity because it had watched them argue, trade, and struggle, but it had never lived like them. It had never grown up on a world where survival depended on constant adjustment. It had never faced extinction-level threats again and again and learned to live anyway. Earth's history shaped its thinking. Humans did not believe in permanent safety. They believed safety had to be earned every day. That belief made them dangerous in ways no one noticed. As years passed, the gap between perception and reality widened. Galactic powers expanded their fleets, confident in their dominance. Smaller civilizations aligned themselves with strong protectors. Trade routes grew busy. Borders hardened. Earth remained on the edge, quiet and compliant. No declarations were made. No threats issued. Humans did not announce a new era or claim a place among the great powers. They kept working. Inside Earth's deep space construction zones, massive hulls slowly took shape. They were larger than anything humans had built before. Not sleek, not beautiful, thick, layered, and modular. Every section could be sealed, every corridor reinforced. These ships were designed to keep functioning even when broken. They carried not just weapons, but factories, medical centers, training facilities, and command hubs. They were built to operate alone, not to humans. This felt normal. History had taught them that relying on others was risky. To the galaxy, this way of thinking was foreign. No one asked why humans were investing so heavily in ships that could cross stars without support. No one questioned why Earth's deep space industry was quietly expanding. The assumption remained that humans were preparing for exploration, not war. That assumption was wrong. Earth was not planning conquest. It was not planning rebellion. It was planning survival in a galaxy that had already proven it could be cruel, unstable, and unforgiving. By the time anyone thought to look more closely, the work was already done. Earth had forged something new not out of ambition, but out of fear, memory, and hard-earned caution. The galaxy never saw it coming because it never believed humans would be capable of it. Humans did not build their war carriers in a time of comfort. They built them while struggling with limits that other civilizations had left behind long ago. Every decision came from necessity, not pride. Earth did not have perfect technology or endless resources. What it had was experienced hard, painful experience with failure. From the beginning, human engineers accepted one truth: things would go wrong, engines would fail, weapons would malfunction, crews would get tired, injured, or cut off from command. Instead of treating these possibilities as rare disasters, humans treated them as normal conditions. Their designs did not aim for perfection. They aimed for survival. Most advanced alien ships were built around efficiency: smooth hulls, centralized power cores, elegant systems that worked flawlessly until they didn't. When one critical system failed, the entire ship often followed. Humans saw this as dangerous. On Earth, they had learned that relying on a single point of success was the fastest path to collapse, so they did the opposite. Human war carriers were built in layers. Thick outer hulls protected inner sections. Between those layers were repair corridors, reinforcement plates, and emergency seal zones. If one section was destroyed, the rest of the ship could survive. Power systems were spread out instead of centralized. Weapons could draw energy from multiple sources. Life support was divided into independent zones. Nothing was allowed to be essential on its own. The ships were heavy, slower than many alien vessels, but they could take punishment that no one expected a human ship to survive. Materials were another problem. Earth did not have access to many rare galactic alloys. Instead of waiting for trade permissions or alliances, humans worked with what they had. They've mixed metals, ceramics, and composites into layered structures. These materials were not impressive on paper, but together they were strong, flexible, and easy to repair. If something broke, crews did not need specialized parts shipped from across the galaxy. They could fabricate replacements on board. That decision shaped everything. Each war carrier carried internal factories, not small repair units but full production systems capable of creating armor plates, weapons components, drones, and even replacement vehicles. Raw material could be harvested from asteroids, debris fields, or destroyed ships. To humans, waste was just unused resource. Alien analysts would later struggle to understand this mindset. Their fleets depended on supply chains and centralized logistics. Human carriers were designed to live off space itself. Weapons followed the same philosophy. Humans did not chase the most powerful single shot. They focused on reliability and adaptability. Their weapons could change output, switch firing modes, and continue working even when damaged. Ammunition systems were simple and rugged. If a weapon overheated, it shut down safely instead of exploding. If it lost targeting data, it could still be fired manually. Inside the ships, nothing was wasted on decoration. Corridors were narrow, walls were thick. Every space had a purpose. Living quarters were small but functional. Medical bays were reinforced like bunkers. Training areas doubled as emergency shelters. Even the layout of the ship was designed for combat short travel distances. Multiple access routes, and sealed sections that could be sacrificed if needed. The crew was as important as the Excel ship. Human training changed completely during this period. Traditional military thinking was challenged. Instead of strict hierarchy and absolute obedience, humans encouraged controlled disagreement. Crews were trained to question orders if the situation demanded it. They were taught the full systems of the ship, not just their assigned roles. Engineers learned combat tactics. Soldiers learned basic repairs. Pilots learned command decision-making. This made training longer and harder, but it created crews that could function even when leadership was lost. Simulations were brutal. Scenarios assumed the worst possible outcomes. Communications failed. Sensors leaked. Friendly ships were destroyed. Crews had to adapt without guidance. Mistakes were analyzed openly, not punished. The goal was learning, not discipline for its own sake. Many trainees quit. Some could not handle the stress. Others realized this kind of service demanded more than they were willing to give. Those who stayed formed tight bonds. Trust was built not on rank, but on shared survival. The war carriers were tested far beyond safety limits. Engineers intentionally pushed systems until they broke. Fires were allowed to spread in controlled environments to study how damage moved through the ship. Whole sections were exposed to extreme forces. Crews practiced sealing off entire decks and continuing operations without them. Two outsiders. This would have looked reckless. Two humans. It was responsible. Because Earth remembered something the galaxy had forgotten. Peace was temporary. Every design meeting returned to one question: what happens if this ship is alone? No allies, no resupply, no rescue. Could it still protect itself? Could it still complete its mission? Could it still bring its crew home? If the answer was no, the design was rejected. Slowly, painfully, the war carriers took shape. They were not beautiful. They did not inspire awe through appearance. But they inspired confidence among those who served on them. Crews trusted their ships because they had seen them survive the impossible during testing. Even command philosophy reflected this mindset. Human carriers were built to operate independently. Each one carried its own command structure, intelligence systems, and decision-making authority. They did not need constant instructions from Earth. They were trusted to act based on conditions in the field. This independence was rare in the galaxy. Most fleets relied on centralized control. Humans believed centralized control failed under pressure. As construction continued, secrecy remained important. Earth did not hide out of fear, but out of practicality. Announcing these ships would attract attention, and attention brought interference. Diplomacy, inspections, restrictions. Humans wanted none of that. Officially, the ships were classified as long-range defense platforms, exploration escorts, heavy logistics carriers. None of those labels were entirely false. That ships could do all of those things, but they could also do much more. Within Earth's leadership, opinions were divided. Some feared these carriers would provoke conflict. Others believed they were necessary insurance. History tipped the balance. Humanity had been caught unprepared too many times before by wars, disasters, and external threats. This time they would not wait. As the first fully operational carrier powered up, there was no ceremony, no speeches broadcast to the galaxy, no grand launch event. Engineers watched silently as systems came online. Crews took their stations. The ship moved under its own power for the first time. It worked. Years of quiet effort had produced something the galaxy did not expect. A ship that did not rely on grace, permission, or luck. A ship built to endure. Humans did not see these carriers as symbols of dominance. They saw them as shields, insurance against a future no one could predict. The galaxy still believed Earth was weak, divided, and harmless. That belief remained intact only because humanity allowed it to. The war carriers were ready. The first true use of a human war carrier was never planned as a grand reveal. It did not begin with a declaration, a warning, or a show of force. It began with silence and a broken signal drifting through space. Far beyond Earth's usual routes. Along a trade corridor controlled by older galactic powers, something went wrong. A long-standing political tension between two dominant civilizations finally turned violent. Fleets moved, borders closed, civilian convoys were caught in between. Smaller worlds that depended on trade and protection were suddenly exposed. One by one, stations went dark, ships vanished, refugee traffic exploded, filling space with panicked transmissions. Most distress calls were ignored. Powerful empires focused on protecting their own interests. Aid required permission, negotiations, and time, things people under attack did not have. One signal, damaged and incomplete, reached Earth. It came from a minor civilization with no military strength of its own. Their message was old by the time it arrived, broken by interference and fear. It spoke of incoming fleets, failing defenses, and evacuation ships being destroyed before they could escape. The message ended mid-sentence. There was debate on Earth, but not for long. Humans had seen this pattern before. On their own planet, waiting for perfect information had often meant waiting too long. Earth did not have formal authority to intervene in that region. The area was politically sensitive. Entering it without approval could cause serious consequences. Still, one decision stood out. A single war carrier was cleared for deployment, not a fleet, not an announcement. Just one ship. The order was simple: investigate, assist if possible, withdraw if necessary. The carrier departed quietly. No public broadcast, no diplomatic signal sent ahead. It traveled faster than any previous human vessel, using routes most species avoided because they were unstable and poorly mapped. Its crew trained during transit, running simulations based on limited data. They assumed the worst. They always did. When the carrier entered the contested system, it found chaos. Wreckage drifted everywhere. Civilian transports burned silently in orbit. Defensive platforms had been torn apart with overwhelming force. Sensors picked up multiple fleets from different factions, all focused on controlling key locations. No one was in charge. Everyone was armed. The carrier identified itself and broadcast a neutral assistance signal. There was no response. Moments later, targeting systems from an alien fleet locked onto the human ship. To the attackers, it looked like a mistake. A lone vessel from a minor species entering a live combat zone. They assumed it was a scouting ship or an outdated escort that had wandered too far from home. They issued a warning and fired a limited volley, expecting the ship to retreat or be destroyed. It did neither. The first impacts hit the carrier's outer hull. Energy shields flared, then adjusted. Armor absorbed damage and redistributed it. Internal systems compensated, or the ship did not change course. Alien commanders paused. Confused, they increased firepower. The carrier took the hits and kept moving. This was the moment everything changed. Human sensors tracked enemy firing patterns in real time. Defensive systems adapted. Countermeasures launched, not flashy, not dramatic, but precise. Enemy targeting began to fail. Communication relays were disrupted. Drones launched from the carrier in coordinated waves, not to attack directly, but to blind and confuse. Then human fighters deployed. They did not fly in clean formations. They moved unpredictably, using debris fields and gravity wells in ways most pilots avoided. Their tactics ignored standard galactic combat doctrine. They closed distance quickly, struck vulnerable systems, and withdrew before enemy fleets could respond effectively. The alien fleet hesitated. That hesitation cost them. The human carrier did not pursue total destruction. It focused on creating space. It positioned itself between the attacking forces and the remaining civilian ships. Point defense systems intercepted incoming fire. Boarding teams launched not to capture territory, but to disable weapons and engines. Within minutes, the engagement was over. The alien fleet withdrew, damaged and confused. They had encountered something they did not understand. The carrier began rescue operations. Immediately, human crews worked without pause. Refugees were brought aboard. Medical teams treated injuries from species they had never encountered before. Engineers stabilized failing habitats. Fighters escorted evacuation ships out of danger. The carrier's internal factories began producing supplies as fast as raw material could be processed. No speeches were made. No flags raised. The carrier stayed. Other fleets returned cautiously, testing the situation. Some attempted to challenge the human ship again. Each time, they were pushed back, not through overwhelming violence, but through controlled, efficient force. The message was clear without being spoken. The space was protected. Data from the engagement spread quickly, even as official channels tried to suppress it. Sensor recordings showed a single human-built vessel standing its ground against forces that had crushed entire systems. Analysts replayed the footage again and again, looking for hidden allies or unknown support. There were none. The realization unsettled the galaxy. This was not a lucky victory. It was not an accident. The carrier had performed exactly as it was designed to. It operated independently, adapted under fire, and completed its mission without external support. Questions spread faster than answers. Why did humans build a ship like this? How many more existed? Why had Earth never mentioned them? Diplomatic channels lit up. Some demanded explanations. Others issued warnings. A few offered sudden alliances. Earth responded slowly and carefully. Official statements described the incident as a humanitarian intervention. The carrier had acted to protect civilians under threat, nothing more. That response frustrated many powers. What frightened them was not just the ship's strength, but its behavior. It had not sought permission. It had not followed expected escalation protocols. It had not retreated when challenged by superior numbers. It had acted as if it expected to stand alone because it did. For the rescued civilians, the carrier became something else entirely. To them, it was not a warship. It was survival. Stories spread of human crews working until exhaustion, of calm voices during evacuations, of ships that refused to abandon the helpless. Those stories traveled far, carried by refugees who owed their lives to a species the galaxy had dismissed. Earth quietly ordered the carrier home after the situation stabilized. It left the system without ceremony, its mission complete, but the damage to old assumptions could not be undone. For the first time, the galaxy had seen humanity not as a developing species, but as an independent force capable of changing outcomes. The encounter forced a recalculation. Earth was no longer invisible. It was unpredictable, and that made it dangerous. Humans returned to their routines. Engineers reviewed data. Crews rested. Training continued. There were no celebrations. To them, the mission had simply confirmed what they already believed. The galaxy was not safe. Now. It knew that Earth was ready. The galaxy did not react all at once. At first, it reacted in pieces. Sensor data from the incident spread quietly through military networks, trade guilds, and intelligence circles. Official reports were delayed, rewritten, and softened, but raw recordings always found their way into the right hands. Analysts across dozens of civilizations watched the same moments again and again. A single human-built carrier entering a contested system, absorbing fire, adapting, and forcing stronger fleets to withdraw. There was no hidden support fleet, no secret allies waiting nearby, just one ship, standing alone. For centuries, the galaxy had relied on clear categories. Civilizations were labeled early and rarely re-evaluated. Major powers ruled, minor species aligned or vanished. Developing worlds were guided, controlled, or ignored. Earth had lived comfortably in the lowest category. The incident shattered that classification. Recalculation began. Military strategists were the first to speak openly. They compared human carrier design to their own fleets and found something uncomfortable. Most galactic navies were built around coordination and hierarchy. Ships depended on constant communication with command centers. Orders flowed from the top. Doctrine was strict. That system worked well until chaos entered the field. The human carrier had been designed for chaos. It did not wait for instructions. It did not hesitate when communications were jammed. Its crew made decisions locally, rapidly, and with confidence. That independence was rare. To many commanders, it felt reckless. To others, it felt dangerous. What disturbed them most was the implication. If one human carrier could operate like that, then a fleet of them would not behave like any known force. They would not be predictable. They would not collapse if leadership was disrupted. They would not retreat simply because doctrine said they should. Political leaders reacted differently. Some were angry. They accused Earth of violating borders, ignoring protocol, and acting without approval. Emergency council meetings were called. Harsh language was used behind closed doors. Demands were prepared. Others were nervous. They asked quiet questions instead. How long had humans been building these ships? How many existed? What were their limits? No one had good answers. Smaller civilizations reacted with hope. For worlds that lived in the shadow of larger powers, the incident felt like a crack in the galaxy's rigid structure. Stories spread among traders and refugees. They spoke of a ship that arrived without being asked, that stayed when others fled, that protected civilians instead of bargaining over them. To these people, Earth suddenly mattered. Requests for contact increased. Some worlds asked for trade agreements. Others asked for protection. A few asked simply to talk. Earth did not rush to answer. Human leadership understood something the galaxy did not. Attention was dangerous. The more visible they became, the more pressure would follow: restrictions, inspections, forced alliances. Humanity had no desire to replace one set of threats with another. So Earth responded slowly and carefully. Official statements were brief and controlled. The carrier's actions were described as a humanitarian response to a civilian emergency. No apology was issued, but no threat was made either. Earth emphasized that it sought stability, not conflict. This frustrated the major powers. They were used to clear signal submission, alliance, or defiance. Earth offered none of those. It acted like a species that did not need approval. Behind the scenes, intelligence agencies worked overtime. Probes were sent. Trade data was analyzed. Construction activity near Earth was monitored closely. But humanity had learned how to hide in plain sight. Their shipyards were spread out. Their industrial networks were layered and decentralized. What little outsiders could see looked civilian and unremarkable. The absence of clear information made things worse. In the galaxy, uncertainty was often more frightening than known threats. Speculation filled the gap. Some believed Earth had only one carrier and had gambled everything on it. Others believed there were dozens, hidden and waiting. A few feared there were many more still under construction. No one could be sure. Military doctrines began to change. Simulations were updated to include human-style independent units. Training manuals warned against underestimating decentralized command structures. Fleet formations were adjusted to account for unpredictable enemy movement. All of this happened quietly, without public acknowledgement. Humanity had not declared itself a power, but the galaxy had begun treating it like one within Earth. Reactions were mixed. Some celebrated quietly. The carrier had proven the concept. The years of effort, secrecy, and sacrifice had not been wasted. Engineers reviewed combat data and found confirmation of their design choices. Redundancy worked. Adaptability mattered. Crew training had saved lives. Others were uneasy. They worried that the incident had exposed humanity too soon, that the carriers would now become targets, not just military ones, but political ones. Earth's leaders debated how visible to become, how fast to expand, and how to avoid being forced into conflicts, not of their choosing. One decision became clear quickly. Earth would not reveal its full strength. The galaxy had seen one carrier. It did not need to see more, not yet. Instead, humanity leaned into ambiguity. They allowed rumors to spread without confirmation. They neither denied nor confirmed fleet numbers. They continued normal trade, diplomacy, and research as if nothing had changed. This confused observers. Some expected Earth to boast, others expected it to retreat. Humanity did neither. It behaved like a civilization that had always been capable and simply chose when to act. That perception mattered in several border regions. Conflicts paused. Fleets that once moved aggressively now hesitated. Commanders wondered if a human carrier might appear if lines were crossed. Even the possibility was enough to slow escalation. Earth had become a factor, not a ruler, not a policeman, a variable dot for smaller worlds. That variable meant opportunity. Quiet agreements were signed. Information was shared. Earth listened more than it spoke. It made no promises it could not keep. For larger powers it meant discomfort. Their dominance was no longer absolute. They had built their systems on the assumption that they were the strongest force in any equation. Humanity's sudden presence challenged that belief. What unsettled them most was motive. Earth did not demand tribute. It did not expand territory. It did not station fleets near foreign worlds. Its carriers did not patrol trade lanes or enforce laws. They appeared only when civilians were threatened and disappeared when the danger passed. That behavior did not fit existing models. Analysts eventually reached an uncomfortable conclusion. Humanity was not building power to rule. It was building power to prevent loss its own and possibly others. That kind of strength was difficult to control. As time passed, the incident became a reference point. Before the human carrier. After the human carrier, galactic history quietly split in two. Earth continued building, refining, and training. Carriers rotated crews. Systems were improved. Mistakes were corrected. There was no rush. Humanity understood patience. The galaxy watched, uncertain. It had misjudged Earth once. It did not intend to do so again. And somewhere deep in that realization was a truth no one wanted to admit out loud. The most dangerous thing about humanity was not its weapons, or its ships, or even its tactics. It was the fact that humans had learned how to stand alone and were willing to do so again if necessary. Earth did not celebrate what it had become. There were no victory parades, no public announcements, no speeches about destiny. To most people on the planet, life continued as normal. Governments argued, cities grew, news cycles moved on. Only a small number of humans truly understood what had changed. They understood that the galaxy now watched Earth differently. After the first carrier returned, Earth's leadership faced a choice. They could step forward and claim a new position among the great powers, or they could remain quiet and let uncertainty do the work. History guided them again. Every time humans had rushed into power on their own world, it had brought conflict. This time they chose restraint. The war carriers were not revealed as a fleet. They were treated as tools, not symbols. Construction continued, but carefully, not in massive numbers, not in one place. Each carrier was improved using lessons learned from real experience. Systems became more efficient. Crews became more skilled. Designs became tougher, not flashier. Humans did not build these ships to dominate space. They built them because they remembered what it felt like to be helpless on Earth. Memory mattered. Humanity carried the weight of wars that came too fast, disasters ignored too long, and promises that arrived after it was too late. That memory shaped every decision. The carriers were not meant to threaten the galaxy. They were meant to make sure no one could threaten humanity or innocent worlds without consequence. The galaxy struggled to understand this. Most civilizations built strength to control others. Power was a language of ownership, borders, and obedience. Earth spoke a different dialect. It used power as insurance. A quiet statement that said, if something terrible happens, we will not be powerless again. Small civilizations noticed this difference first. Worlds that had lived under protection treaties that felt more like cages began to rethink their options. Earth did not demand loyalty. It did not station permanent forces. It did not rewrite laws. It listened. It offered cooperation instead of control. Sometimes that cooperation meant help. Sometimes it meant advice. Sometimes it meant nothing more than being known. That alone changed things. The idea that a powerful civilization could choose restraint unsettled the old order. Some major powers accused Earth of hiding its true intentions. Others tried to provoke reactions, testing boundaries. Human responses were always measured, calm, firm. If threatened directly, the answer was clear and immediate. If not, Earth stayed quiet. This consistency built a new reputation. Humans became known as predictable in motive, but unpredictable in method. No one could be sure when a carrier might appear or how it would act, only that it would not act without reason. That uncertainty reshaped behavior across entire regions of space. Aggressive expansions slowed. Risk calculations changed. The galaxy became more cautious. Within the carriers themselves, life was not heroic or glamorous. Crews trained, repaired, argued, laughed, and worried. They were ordinary people carrying extraordinary responsibility. They knew they might be sent where no one else would go. They accepted that not because they sought glory, but because they trusted the reason behind it. Each carrier carried more than weapons. It carried memory. Stories of Earth's past failures and hard lessons were part of training. New crew members learned why redundancy mattered, why independence mattered, why hesitation could cost lives. They were taught that the ship was not there to conquer, but to endure. Over time, the galaxy adjusted. Humanity was no longer classified as a developing species. It was labeled something new, something uncomfortable, a self-reliant civilization, one that did not depend on permission to act, one that could survive isolation, one that could say no and mean it. That label changed diplomacy. Earth was invited into discussions. It had once been excluded from, not because it demanded a seat, but because ignoring it was no longer safe. Humans participated without trying to dominate. They offered perspectives shaped by survival rather than ambition. Sometimes they disagreed openly. Sometimes they walked away. That, too, was new. The war carriers became rare sights, but their presence was felt even when unseen. In moments of crisis, distress calls began including Earth as a possible contact, not a guarantee, a hope. Sometimes a carrier responded, sometimes it did not. The choice was always deliberate. When carriers did appear, they followed the same pattern: stabilize the situation, protect civilians, remove immediate threats, leave no occupation, no flags planted, just space left quieter than before. This behavior confused old power structures but slowly earned trust among those who needed it most. Earth never claimed to be a guardian of the galaxy. Humans knew better than to believe in permanent roles. They believed in responsibility where it mattered, and humility where it didn't. The carriers were expressions of that belief, strong enough to act, restrained enough to stop in time. Even the great powers adapted. They stopped trying to force Earth into existing categories. New doctrines were written, new alliances formed. Some grudges remained, but open hostility faded. No one wanted to be the first to test humanity without cause. The galaxy had learned something important. Strength did not always announce itself. Earth had forged its war carriers not from ambition, but from fear shaped into discipline, from memory shaped into preparation, from weakness turned into resolve. The galaxy never saw it coming because it never understood the pressure humans had lived under for so long. Humans did not seek to rule the stars. They sought to make sure that if darkness came again, whether to them or to others, someone would be ready to stand against it. And that was what they really built. Not just ships that could cross the stars, but the certainty that humanity would never again face the universe unprepared.